The funeral was beautiful, which made dying at 23 feel even more absurd. I watched from somewhere above, or maybe beside. The physics of death weren't exactly clear, as my parents sobbed over my closed casket. My sister Riley stood between them, her face perfectly composed in that porcelain mask of grief she'd perfected over the years. She dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, and I wondered if anyone else noticed she wasn't actually crying. But what caught my attention, what made my incorporeal form burn with a rage that transcended death itself, was what she held in her other hand. My childhood photo album, the one Mom had made for me when I turned 18, filled with pictures from my entire life. The album I'd kept on my bookshelf, the one that documented every important moment of my existence. Riley clutched it to her chest like a precious artifact, and I watched as she leaned over to whisper something to our cousin Michelle. "I'm going to put Cassie's photos in my room," she said, her voice carrying that breathy, wounded quality she used when she wanted sympathy. I just, I need to keep her close to me, you know? We were so close. We weren't close. We hadn't been close since I was 8 years old and Riley was 10, and she'd realized that being cruel to me earned her more attention than being kind. Michelle nodded sympathetically, squeezing Riley's shoulder. Nobody questioned it. Nobody ever questioned Riley. As I floated there, watching my own memorial service, I thought about the irony. In life, I'd always been the invisible one, the forgotten child, the placeholder daughter who existed to make Riley look better by comparison. And now, in death, she was literally taking my face, my memories, my documented existence, and claiming them for herself. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear that album from her perfectly manicured hands. I wanted to make everyone in that church see what I'd always known, that Riley Hartford was a masterful actress, and I'd been her supporting character for my entire life. But I couldn't do any of those things because I was dead. Or at least I thought I was. The thing about dying young from a freak allergic reaction to a medication you didn't know you were allergic to is that you have a lot of regrets. Not the big, dramatic ones people talk about. I didn't regret not traveling to Paris or not telling some great love how I felt. My regrets were smaller, more personal, and somehow more devastating. I regretted every time I'd let Riley take credit for my achievements. I regretted every family dinner where I'd stayed silent while she monopolized the conversation. I regretted every birthday where she'd made sure her gift-giving performance overshadowed my actual birthday. I regretted every single photograph where she'd positioned herself in front of me, where she'd made sure she was the focus, where she'd literally and metaphorically pushed me into the background. And most of all, I regretted that even in death, she was taking what little evidence existed that I had been here at all. As the funeral ended and people filed out, Riley made a show of clutching my photo album. She let Mom and Dad hug her, both of them telling her how strong she was being, how much they admired her devotion to her little sister's memory. I followed them home, because apparently ghosts can do that, and watched as Riley went up to her room. Her room that was twice the size of mine had been. Her room that had always gotten redecorated first. That had the better view. That had actually been my room before she decided she wanted it when she was 12. I watched as she opened my album and started removing photos. But she wasn't putting them up to honor me. She was curating them, selecting only the ones where she appeared with me, only the ones where she looked good. She tossed aside the solo photos of me, the first day of school pictures, my 8th grade graduation, the candid shots of me at my robotics competitions. Those went into a box under her bed. The photos she did hang up. She arranged artfully on her wall. To anyone else, it would look like a touching memorial to a beloved sister. But I could see the truth. In every single photo she'd chosen, Riley was the star. I was always slightly out of focus or partially cropped out or positioned to make her look better. She was literally editing me out of my own life story. I watched her step back and admire her work, and I saw the small smile that crossed her face. Not grief, satisfaction. That's when something inside me or around me or whatever constituted me in this state broke. If I could have cried, I would have. Instead, I felt something else. A burning, desperate wish. A desire so strong it seemed to pull at the very fabric of whatever reality I now inhabited. I wanted another chance. I wanted to exist on my own terms. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to matter. The world went white. I woke up to the sound of my mother yelling my name. Cassandra Marie Hartford! If you're not down here in 5 minutes, you're walking to school. My eyes snapped open. I was staring at a ceiling I recognized. Powder blue with glow-in-the-dark stars I'd arranged into constellations when I was 9. Stars that had been painted over years ago when Riley convinced our parents that my room would make a better guest room and I should take the smaller bedroom down the hall. But I was looking at them now. My heart pounded as I sat up. The room was wrong, or rather, it was right, but it shouldn't be. This was my old room. My posters of planets and astronauts covered the walls. My bookshelf held picture books and middle-grade novels I hadn't seen in years. My desk had my old desktop computer, the bulky kind from the early 2010s. I stumbled out of bed and caught sight of myself in the mirror. I was 10 years old. My breath caught, round cheeks, braces, hair in a messy ponytail. The same purple pajamas I'd worn threadbare when I was in 5th grade. I reached up and touched my face, and the reflection did the same. This wasn't possible. Cassie, 4 minutes! I stood there, frozen, trying to process what was happening. Was this a dream? Some kind of afterlife hallucination? Was I in a coma, living out some elaborate fantasy? But it felt real. My feet were cold on the hardwood floor. My stomach growled with hunger. My mouth tasted like I needed to brush my teeth. Everything was visceral and immediate in a way dreams never were. I had been reborn. Or rather, I'd been sent back. Back to a time before everything went wrong. Back to when I was 10 years old in 5th grade, still trying to figure out who I was supposed to be. Back to when Riley was 12 and had just started middle school, and the dynamic between us was about to shift forever. My hands shook as I grabbed clothes from my dresser. I knew these clothes. I remembered this day, or at least I thought I did. The fog of 13 years made it hard to be certain, but something about this morning felt significant. I got dressed in a daze, my muscle memory from my 23-year-old mind clashing with my 10-year-old body. Everything felt slightly wrong, too small, too young, too limited. When I made it downstairs with 30 seconds to spare, Mom was already ushering Riley toward the door. My sister looked exactly as I remembered her at 12, pretty in that awkward middle school way, with her hair in perfect waves that she'd spent an hour on that morning. She wore a new outfit, something trendy that I knew Dad had taken her shopping for the day before. I was in hand-me-downs from my cousin. Finally, Mom said, thrusting my backpack at me. Riley's bus comes in 10 minutes and I need to drive you to school because you took so long. Again, Cassie, we talked about this. Sorry, Mom. Riley smirked at me, that little superior smile that said she'd been ready on time, that she was the good daughter, the organized one. At 12, she'd already perfected that look. The drive to my elementary school was quiet. Mom dropped me off with a distracted, "Have a good day," before rushing off to get Riley to the middle school. I stood there on the sidewalk watching the car disappear, trying to understand what cosmic force had given me the second chance. And then it hit me. If I was 10 years old again, I had 13 years of knowledge that Riley didn't. 13 years of watching her manipulate situations, understanding her patterns, seeing through her performances. More importantly, I had 13 years of regrets to fix. Starting today, I remembered this day, or at least I was starting to. Today was school picture day. Today was the day that Riley would convince Mom to let her take pictures with me as a sweet surprise for Dad. Today was the day one of the most displayed photos in our house would be taken, the one of Riley and me, that sat on the mantle for years, where Riley looked beautiful and I looked awkward, where her smile was perfect and mine was forced. That photo had always bothered me, but I'd never been able to articulate why until I was older and understood manipulation better. Riley had orchestrated the entire thing, insisting on taking the picture, positioning us so she was front and center, coaching me to smile in a way that looked stiff and uncomfortable while she looked natural and lovely. It was the template for our entire relationship, captured in one photograph, not this time. When the photographer called my name during picture time, I walked up with my shoulders back and my chin up. The photographer was the same woman I remembered, Mrs. Chen, with her patient smile and colorful scarves. "Big smile, sweetheart," she said. And I smiled. Not the forced, uncomfortable smile of a 10-year-old who didn't know how to be herself yet, but a real smile. Confident, present, knowing exactly who I was and refusing to apologize for it. The flash went off and Miss Chen beamed. Beautiful. That's going to be a great one. I felt it like a small victory. One photograph where I would look like myself, where I wouldn't disappear into the background. It was a start. The real test came 3 hours later during lunch recess. Riley appeared at the elementary school fence, which separated my playground from her middle school next door. She shouldn't have been there. Middle schoolers weren't supposed to leave their campus. But Riley had always been good at doing what she wanted without getting caught. Cassie, hi, she called, waving me over. In my original timeline, I'd run to that fence excited that my cool older sister wanted to talk to me. I'd been naive enough to think she actually cared. This time, I took my time walking over. What do you want? I asked. Riley's eyes widened slightly. I never used that tone with her. I was always eager, always seeking her approval, always grateful for whatever scraps of attention she threw my way. Don't be like that, she said, her voice taking on that sweet, manipulative quality. I wanted to surprise you. I talked to the principal and they said we could take a picture together for school picture day. Isn't that exciting? We can give it to Mom and Dad. I stared at her. At 12, she was already learning how to use her charm as a weapon. Already understanding that if she framed things as gifts for others, nobody would question her motives. No thanks, I said. Her smile faltered. What? I said no thanks. I already took my school picture. But this would be special. A picture of both of us together. She was using her confused, innocent voice now, the one that made adults rush to comfort her. Don't you want Mom and Dad to have a nice picture of their daughters? There it was, the manipulation. Making it about them, not about what she really wanted. Another photograph where she could position herself as the central important figure while I faded into the background. If Mom and Dad want a picture of us together, they can take one at home, I said. I'm going to go play now. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding. I'd never stood up to Riley before. Never. And the look on her face, shock mixed with anger, mixed with something else I couldn't quite name, was almost worth the 13 years of pain that had led to this moment. Behind me, I heard her call out, Cassie, wait! But I didn't stop. My 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Robertson, noticed Riley at the fence and went over to shoo her back to her own school. I watched from the swing set as Riley argued, gesturing toward me, probably trying to paint herself as the caring older sister being rejected by her difficult younger sibling. But Mrs. Robertson was unmoved. Riley had to leave. That small victory felt massive. That evening, Riley came into my room without knocking. She never knocked. What was that today? She demanded. I was sitting at my desk working on homework. In my previous life, I would have been intimidated. Riley at 12 had seemed so much older, so much more powerful, but I'd lived through her at 22, watched her manipulation evolve into a high art. At 10 years old, with a 23-year-old's memories, I wasn't scared of her anymore. What was what? I asked, not looking up from my math worksheet. At lunch, the picture thing. You embarrassed me in front of my friends. You were at my school during your lunch period. That's against the rules. That's not... She stopped, recalculating. I was trying to do something nice for you. No, you weren't. The bluntness of it stopped her. Riley wasn't used to directness. She was used to dancing around the truth, to implications and emotional manipulations. What's that supposed to mean? I put down my pencil and turned to look at her. Really look at her. At 12, Riley was on the cusp of the beauty she'd grow into. She was starting to understand the power of her appearance, the way people's eyes lingered on her, the way adults smiled more readily at her than at other kids. It means, I said carefully, that I don't want to take pictures with you. I want to have my own school pictures, just me. That's selfish. Is it? Yes. Family takes pictures together. That's what families do. We can take pictures at home, but my school pictures are mine. Riley's face flushed. I'm telling Mom. Okay. She stared at me, and I could see her struggling to find the angle, the approach that would work. In our original timeline, she would have found it. She would have cried or gotten angry, or found some way to make me feel guilty until I gave in. But I wasn't the same Cassie anymore. "You're being weird," she finally said. "Maybe." She stood there for a moment longer, then turned and left, slamming my door behind her. I went back to my homework, but my hands were shaking. Standing up to Riley felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. Mom called me down to the living room an hour later. Riley sat on the couch next to her, and I could see the dried tear tracks on my sister's face. She'd been crying, or pretending to cry. With Riley, it was always hard to tell. "Cassie, your sister is upset," Mom began, her voice using that careful, measured tone that meant she was trying to be the fair parent. "She says you were rude to her today." "I wasn't rude. I just didn't want to take a picture with her." Mom frowned. "Sweetheart, Riley was trying to do something nice. School pictures are expensive, and she thought it would be a lovely gift for me and your father to have a picture of you both together." I'd heard this speech before, or a version of it. 13 years ago, Mom had said something similar when I'd initially hesitated about the photo. Back then, I'd given in immediately, not wanting to seem ungrateful or difficult. "Mom, I already took my school picture today. Riley wanted to take a separate one together at lunch. She wasn't even supposed to be at my school." Mom's expression shifted slightly. That detail clearly surprised her. She glanced at Riley, who immediately looked down at her hands. "Riley, you left campus during lunch?" I wanted it to be a surprise," Riley said, her voice small and wounded. "I thought Cassie would be excited, but she was mean about it, and I got in trouble with my principal, and now I might get detention. And it's all because I was trying to be a good sister." The manipulation was textbook. Deflect blame. Make herself the victim. Pull at Mom's sympathy. In my original timeline, it had worked perfectly. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice calm and factual, "Riley didn't get in trouble with her principal. Mrs. Robertson from my school just told her to go back to campus. And I wasn't mean. I just said I didn't want to take the picture." Mom looked between us, and I could see her trying to navigate this. In most of our conflicts, she defaulted to Riley's side, not because she loved her more necessarily, but because Riley was louder, more emotional, more demanding of attention. "Cassie, even if you didn't want to take the picture, you should have been more considerate of your sister's feelings. She was trying to do something nice." There it was, the same pattern. Riley's feelings always mattered more than mine. But I'd had 13 years to think about this, 13 years to wish I'd said what I really thought. "Mom, can I ask you something?" She looked surprised. "Of course." "If I wanted to go to Riley's school during my lunch and take a picture with her, would you think that was appropriate?" That's different." "How?" Mom opened her mouth, then closed it again. She hadn't expected me to push back. I never pushed back. "I just think," Mom said finally, "that you should be kinder to your sister. She looks up to you." That was such a patent lie that I almost laughed. Riley had never looked up to me. She'd looked down on me from the moment she figured out that being cruel got her more attention than being kind. But I could see I wasn't going to win this argument. Not directly, not yet. "I'm sorry if I hurt Riley's feelings," I said, the words bitter in my mouth. "But I still don't want to take pictures with her for school picture day. My pictures are mine." I saw Riley's jaw clench. She wasn't getting what she wanted, and she wasn't used to that. "Fine," Mom said with a sigh. "But I'm disappointed in you, Cassie. Family should stick together." I went back upstairs, Riley's glare burning into my back. Behind my closed door, I sat on my bed and tried to steady my breathing. That had been harder than I expected. Even with 13 years of life experience, standing up to my family felt like trying to swim against a riptide. But I'd done it, I'd said no. The school pictures arrived 3 weeks later. Mine came in the usual packet, sheets of different sizes, wallet photos, digital copies. I looked at the main 8x10 and felt a weird surge of emotion. I looked happy, present, like a real kid with a real personality, not just Riley Hartford's younger sister. Riley's pictures came the same day, and they were beautiful, of course. She'd always been photogenic. Mom immediately put Riley's 8x10 in a frame on the mantle. She put mine in the hallway. Not prominent, not displayed, just there. It stung, but I'd expected it. Changing the present wouldn't automatically change 13 years of family dynamics. This was going to be a longer battle than I'd anticipated. The next major test came 3 months later in January, my 11th birthday. In my original timeline, my 11th birthday party had been a disaster, though I hadn't realized it at the time. Riley had convinced Mom to let her help plan my party, and she'd taken over completely, choosing the theme, something she liked, not what I wanted, inviting her friends instead of mine, and making sure she was the center of attention the entire time. I'd been so desperate for her approval that I'd gone along with everything. This time was going to be different. I want a space-themed party, I told Mom 6 weeks before my birthday. Planets and stars, and I want to invite my robotics club friends. Mom looked surprised. That's very specific, honey. Don't you want something more traditional? Riley suggested we could do a princess party. I don't want a princess party. I want space. But, Mom, I looked her directly in the eyes. It's my birthday. I want a space party with my robotics friends. Please. Something in my tone must have registered because Mom nodded slowly. Okay, space party it is. We'll need to figure out decorations and I'll help. I have ideas. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into planning my own party. I researched decorations online, made Pinterest boards, which felt weird to use as a 10-year-old with 23-year-old knowledge, and kept everything focused on what I actually wanted. Riley tried to insert herself multiple times. I think we should invite some of my friends too, she suggested one evening. You know, to make sure there are enough people. I have enough people. I invited 8 kids from robotics. 8? That's such a small party. It's the party I want. She tried again a week later. Mom, I think we should do karaoke instead of the astronomy activity Cassie planned. Everyone loves karaoke. I don't love karaoke, I said. I love astronomy. It's my party. You're being selfish. It's literally my birthday party. Mom, to her credit, backed me up this time. Maybe because I'd been so clear about what I wanted, or maybe because even she could see that Riley was trying to take over. Either way, my 11th birthday party ended up being exactly what I'd wanted. 8 kids from robotics club, space decorations everywhere, a telescope I'd begged Dad to rent for the weekend so we could do actual stargazing, educational presentations about the solar system that I'd prepared with an enthusiasm that came from years of suppressed interests. It was perfect. Riley spent the entire party sulking in her room. And when Dad took photos, lots of photos, I made sure I was in the center of every single one, smiling, happy, surrounded by friends who actually liked me for me, not because I was Riley Hartford's sister. When those photos went up around the house, I noticed something interesting. Mom displayed them prominently, not hidden in the hallway like my school picture, right there in the living room, on the photo ledge where everyone could see them. Maybe because they were birthday photos. Maybe because I looked so genuinely happy in them. Maybe because even Mom could see that this party had meant something to me. Or maybe, just maybe, things were starting to shift. The real turning point came in the summer before 6th grade. Mom decided to organize all our family photos. She'd been meaning to do it for years, she said, and now she finally had the time. She bought archival boxes and albums and acid-free tissue paper, and she spent weeks sorting through decades of pictures. "Girls, come help me," she called one Saturday morning. Riley and I came downstairs to find the living room covered in photographs, hundreds of them, our entire childhood spread out across every surface. "I thought we could go through these together," Mom said. "Pick out your favorites for albums. I'm going to make each of you a special album of your childhood." My heart stuttered. This was it. This was the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. In my original timeline, this had been when Riley started taking photos out of what would have been my album. She'd claimed she wanted copies for her room, and Mom had let her. Later, after I died, Riley had taken even more, my entire album, really, to curate her grief performance. Not this time. I think we should each organize our own albums, I said. That way they're more personal. Riley's eyes narrowed. She knew what I was doing. That's a nice idea, Mom said, but I thought it would be fun to do together. I want my album to be private, I said firmly. Just my photos, the ones of me. Riley can have her own album with her photos. But what about photos of both of you? Mom asked. There are so many sweet pictures of you together. We can make copies of those, I said. But I want my own album with my photos, just mine. I could feel Riley's anger radiating across the room. This was a direct challenge to her usual pattern of taking whatever she wanted, including my documented existence. Fine, Riley said, her voice tight. I'll make my own album too. I don't need Cassie's baby pictures anyway. We spent the next few hours sorting. Mom supervised, but she let us each claim our own photos. I was methodical, taking every single picture where I appeared. Solo shots, family shots, school photos, birthday photos, every single one. Riley tried to grab photos where we appeared together. I'm taking copies of these, she announced. Okay, I said, copies, not the originals. Why do you care? Because they're photos of me. I should have the originals of photos of me. Mom intervened. Girls, let's not fight about this. Riley, we can make copies at the photo shop. Cassie's right that she should have originals of her own photos. Riley's face flushed with frustration. She wasn't used to not getting her way. Over the next few weeks, Mom took the photos to be copied and printed. When they came back, I organized my album carefully, chronologically, with notes about where each photo was taken and what was happening in my life at that moment. It was my history, my story, mine. Riley organized hers too, but I noticed she kept trying to sneak looks at my album when I was working on it, trying to see what photos I'd included, how I'd arranged them, what my narrative looked like. I kept my album in my room, in my desk drawer, where she couldn't touch it. One night, I woke up to the sound of my door creaking open. I stayed very still, breathing deeply, pretending to be asleep. Riley crept into my room. I watched through slitted eyes as she went to my desk and tried to open the drawer. It was locked. I'd known she would try this. Known it with the certainty of someone who'd lived through her thefts before. Riley stood there for a long moment, then left empty-handed. The next morning, she was coldly furious with me at breakfast. Why is your desk drawer locked? She asked, her voice dripping with false casualness. Because it's my private desk, I said. What are you hiding? Nothing. I just like having privacy. That's weird. Maybe. Mom looked between us but didn't comment. I think even she was starting to notice that. Something had shifted between Riley and me, that I wasn't the pushover little sister anymore. I just smiled and ate my cereal. 6th grade was when things really changed. I entered middle school with confidence I shouldn't have had at 11 years old. I knew what to expect. I knew which teachers were good and which ones to avoid. I knew that 6th grade's social dynamics were brutal but ultimately meaningless. Most importantly, I knew who I was. I joined the robotics team immediately. I signed up for advanced math and science classes. I made friends with other kids who actually cared about learning, who were excited about technology and space and figuring out how things worked. Riley, now in 8th grade, had tried to interfere. You shouldn't join robotics, she told me on my first day, but everyone thinks the robotics kids are nerds. I am a nerd, I said cheerfully. You're going to be social suicide. I don't care. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You should care. I care. It's embarrassing to have a little sister who what? Who likes science? Who has her own interests? Who isn't trying to copy you? That last part hit home. I saw it in the way her expression shifted. I never said you were copying me, she said defensively. Good. Because I'm not. I walked away, leaving her standing in the middle school hallway, looking confused and angry in equal measure. The truth was, in my original timeline, I had tried to copy Riley, tried to like what she liked, be interested in what she was interested in, dress how she dressed. I'd spent so much energy trying to be a version of myself that she, and by extension, everyone else, would approve of. It had never worked. I'd always been the lesser copy, the discount version, Riley Hartford's awkward little sister. This time, I was just Cassie Hartford, and I liked who that person was. The robotics team became my sanctuary. There were 8 of us, me, 2 other 6th graders, 3 7th graders, and 2 8th graders. We met 3 times a week after school to work on our projects and prepare for competitions. I threw myself into it with an intensity that probably seemed weird for an 11-year-old, but I had years of suppressed passion to make up for. In my original life, I'd let robotics fall by the wayside when Riley started making fun of it. I'd quit the team in 7th grade because she'd convinced me it was social suicide. This time, I stayed, and I excelled. Our team captain was an 8th grader named Marcus Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, the photographer, who was brilliant with mechanical engineering. When he saw my design for an improved gripper mechanism for our robot, his eyes lit up. "This is incredible," he said, studying my sketches. "How did you think of this?" "I've been thinking about it for a while," I said, which was technically true if you counted thinking about it in my previous life. We built my design into our competition robot. It worked beautifully. When we won 3rd place at the regional competition in February, the local paper did a story on our team. They took a group photo of all of us holding our robot and our trophy. I was right in the center, smiling, genuinely happy. That photo ended up in the newspaper, and Mom proudly put the clipping in a frame on the mantel, right next to Riley's 8th grade formal photo. For the first time, we were displayed equally. Riley hated it. The blow-up happened in March, 2 months before Riley's middle school graduation. She cornered me in my room one evening, her face tight with anger. "You're doing this on purpose," she accused. "Doing what?" "This whole thing. Acting different. Changing everything. Taking up space." "I'm not taking up space. I'm just existing." "You're making me look bad." There it was, the real issue. In Riley's world, there was a finite amount of attention and approval, and if I got more, she got less. "I'm not making you look bad," I said carefully. I'm just doing my own thing." "No, you're not. You're trying to steal the spotlight. My graduation is coming up and you're making everything about you and your stupid robot competitions." "Riley, those are 2 completely separate things." "No, they're not. Mom won't shut up about your robotics team. Dad keeps showing people that newspaper article. Nobody cares about my graduation anymore because you're being so extra about everything." I stared at her. This was the clearest she'd ever been about her resentment. Usually Riley was subtle, manipulative, but right now she was just angry and honest. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said, meaning it. "But I'm not going to stop doing things I love just so you can have more attention. You used to understand. You used to know your place." The words hung in the air between us, ugly and revealing. "My place?" I repeated. "What's my place, Riley?" She didn't answer, but we both knew what she meant. My place was in the background, supporting her, making her look good, being the lesser sister. "I don't have a place," I said quietly. "I'm not a supporting character in your life. I'm the main character in mine." Riley's eyes filled with tears, real tears this time, I thought, not manipulative ones. "You've changed," she whispered. "You used to love me." That hit me harder than I expected. Because it was true, in a way. The old Cassie, the one who'd lived to 23, always seeking Riley's approval, had loved her, or had desperately wanted to love her, wanted to have the sister relationship she'd always dreamed of. "I do love you," I said. "But I love myself more now." She left without another word. Riley's graduation came and went. It was a big deal. The whole family went, Mom cried, Dad took hundreds of photos. Riley gave a speech as class vice president, and she was poised and perfect and everything she'd always been. I cheered for her. I hugged her. I told her I was proud of her. And I meant it. I could want to exist on my own terms and still be happy for my sister's achievements. Those things weren't mutually exclusive. But I also noticed that the family photo from her graduation, all four of us together, positioned differently than they had in my original timeline. In that old life, Riley had made sure she was front and center, with me partially hidden behind Dad. This time, we stood side by side, equal, both visible. It was Mom who'd arranged us that way, and I saw her smile as she looked at the photo on the camera screen. "Perfect," she said. "Both my beautiful daughters." Both. Not just Riley. I caught Riley's eye, and something passed between us. Not quite forgiveness, not quite understanding, but maybe a recognition that things were different now and they weren't going back to how they were. High school was liberating in ways I'd never experienced in my original timeline. I started freshman year with a clear sense of who I was and what I wanted. I took advanced placement classes. I stayed on the robotics team and became team captain by sophomore year. I made friends with people who challenged me intellectually, who wanted to talk about ideas and discoveries rather than gossip and social hierarchies. Riley, now a junior, moved in completely different social circles. She was on the student council. She dated popular guys. She went to parties and football games and all the things I had zero interest in. And for the first time, that was okay. We coexisted in the same school, occasionally passing each other in the halls, existing in parallel rather than in conflict. Until the incident with the college counselor. It happened in the spring of my sophomore year. Riley was starting to think about colleges. She was a junior now, and Mom made an appointment with the school's college counselor for both of us at the same time. "So we can plan ahead," Mom explained. "Start thinking about Cassie's path, too." The counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was a practical woman in her 50s who'd been at the school for 20 years. She pulled out our files and looked them over. "Riley, your grades are good," she said. "B+ average, solid extracurriculars, student council, volleyball. You're looking at decent state schools, maybe some smaller private colleges." Riley nodded, her smile tight. I could tell she'd hoped for more praise. Then Mrs. Rodriguez turned to Mema. "Cassie, your academic profile is exceptional. All A's, advanced placement classes, robotics team captain, science fair awards. You could be looking at top-tier engineering schools, MIT, Caltech, Carnegie Mellon. With your trajectory, you might even qualify for merit scholarships." The silence in the room was deafening. I felt Riley's stare burning into the side of my face, felt Mom's surprise, felt the shift in the air as everyone recalculated their understanding of who we were. That's wonderful, Cassie," Mom said finally. "Didn't realize you were doing quite so well." "Because you weren't paying attention, I thought, but didn't say." Mrs. Rodriguez continued, oblivious to the tension. "Riley, you could certainly apply to some of these schools too if you're interested in engineering." "I'm not," Riley said flatly. "I want to study communications." "Oh, that's fine. There are great communications programs at lots of schools. But Cassie, for engineering, you're really looking at a bright future. Let's talk about what kind of programs interest you most." The meeting continued, but I could barely focus. I was hyper-aware of Riley's rigid posture, Mom's confused glances between us, the way the counselor kept directing most of her enthusiasm toward me. In my original life, I'd been accepted to a good engineering school, not MIT. I hadn't tried for MIT, but a solid state university. I'd been happy about it. Riley had gotten into a small private college for communications. She'd been ecstatic. But we'd both been in our appropriate places. Her slightly ahead, me following behind. This was different. This counselor was putting me ahead, not just slightly, significantly. After the meeting, Riley didn't speak to me for 3 days. The college application process became a minefield. Riley applied to 15 schools, most of them communications programs at mid-tier universities. She was stressed, constantly talking about essays and deadlines, and what would happen if she didn't get in anywhere. I applied to 8 schools, 7 top engineering programs, and 1 safety school. Mom tried to make us apply to the same places. "Wouldn't it be nice if you girls went to the same college?" she suggested more than once. "No," Riley and I said simultaneously. It was one of the few things we agreed on. When the acceptance letters started arriving, the tension in our house reached a breaking point. Riley got into 7 of her 15 schools, rejections from her top 3 choices, acceptances from perfectly fine mid-tier programs. I got into all 8 schools, including MIT. The day the MIT acceptance letter came, I stood in our kitchen holding the thick envelope, trying to process what this meant. In my original life, I hadn't even applied to MIT, hadn't thought I was good enough, hadn't wanted to deal with Riley's reaction if I aimed higher than her. Now I'd not only applied, I'd gotten in. MIT, Dad breathed, reading over my shoulder. Cassie, that's incredible, MIT. Riley was at the kitchen table, staring at her laptop where she'd been researching one of the schools that had accepted her. Congratulations, she said, her voice hollow. Thanks. MIT, Mom repeated like she couldn't quite believe it. That's one of the best schools in the world. I know. We should celebrate. I need to go, Riley said abruptly, standing up. I have plans. She left before anyone could respond. I stood there holding my acceptance letter, feeling the weight of what I'd just done. I'd surpassed her, not just in this moment, but in a way that would define both our futures. In my original life, Riley had been the successful one, the pretty popular daughter who landed a decent job in marketing after college, who got engaged first, who seemed to have everything figured out. I'd been the quiet one. The smart one, sure, but not exceptional, not threatening. Now I was going to MIT, and we both knew what that meant. I was winning. The months leading up to my high school graduation were strange. Riley, now a high school graduate herself and working a retail job while taking community college classes online, seemed to shrink somehow. She'd deferred her acceptance to a 4-year school, claiming she wanted to save money. But I knew the truth. She was struggling. Struggling with the fact that her younger sister had surpassed her in the one area that mattered to our parents: achievement. I didn't gloat. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just living my life, making choices that were right for me. But the contrast was stark. My graduation day arrived. I was valedictorian, not because I'd set out to be, but because I'd taken challenging classes and genuinely loved learning. I gave a speech about curiosity and innovation and not being afraid to take up space in the world. I didn't look at Riley while I spoke, but I felt her presence in the audience. After the ceremony, there were photos. So many photos. Me in my cap and gown, me with my diploma, me with my awards and cords and honors. Dad was the photographer capturing everything. Get a picture with your sister, Mom called. Both my graduates together. Riley and I stood next to each other. We smiled. It wasn't hostile exactly, but it wasn't warm either. Dad took the photo. Later, I'd look at that picture and see what had changed. In my original timeline, there had been a photo like this at my high school graduation. Riley had positioned herself in front of me, her arm around my shoulders in a way that pushed me partially out of frame. She'd smiled brilliantly at the camera while I looked awkward and uncomfortable. In this new photo, we stood side by side. Equal. Both fully visible. Both in focus. Riley looked like she was trying not to cry. I looked proud but thoughtful. It was honest, that photo. It captured the reality of where we were. 2 sisters who'd grown up in the same house but taken very different paths, neither quite sure how to relate to each other anymore. Mom put that photo on the mantle when we got home, right in the center where everyone could see it. My girls, she said fondly. Riley excused herself and went upstairs. I stood there looking at the mantle at all the photos displayed there. So many of them were different from my original timeline. Photos where I was visible, where I took up space, where I existed as fully as Riley did. It had taken years. It had been exhausting and painful and lonely at times, but I'd rewritten my own history. I graduated from MIT 4 years later with a degree in mechanical engineering and job offers from 3 different robotics companies. Riley graduated from her online program and got a job in social media management. She was good at it. She'd always understood how to present a curated image. We saw each other at holidays. We were polite. Sometimes we even laughed together at family dinners, reminiscing about childhood memories that we both remembered differently now. She never apologized for trying to erase me. I never brought it up. But something shifted between us during my second year at MIT. Riley called me one night and I could tell she'd been crying. I don't know how to talk to you anymore, she admitted. You're this successful engineer with this incredible career ahead of you, and I'm just me. Riley, no, let me finish. I think I spent so much of our childhood trying to make sure I was the important one that I never learned how to be proud of you, and now I don't know how to fix that. I sat with that for a moment. In my original life, she'd never have said this. She'd never have been self-aware enough to recognize what she'd done. I don't need you to be proud of me, I said finally. I need you to see me. Just see me as a whole person, not as competition, not as a supporting character, just as Cassie. I'm trying, she said quietly. I'm really trying. I know. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something. A recognition that we were both flawed, both human, both trying to figure out how to be sisters in a way that didn't require one of us to disappear. 5 years after that, I was home for Christmas. I was 28 now, working for a robotics company in Boston, leading a team developing prosthetic limbs with haptic feedback. Riley was 30, engaged to a man who seemed to genuinely love her, working as a social media director for a nonprofit. Mom had reorganized the mantle again. There were photos of both of us at various stages of life. Me at my MIT graduation, Riley at her engagement party, me presenting at a robotics conference, Riley at her new job. We were both there, both visible, both taking up space. Riley found me looking at the photos. Remember when you refused to take that picture with me in elementary school? She asked. Yes. I was so mad at you. I know. I think that was the first time you ever said no to me, really said no. I nodded. It was important. I get it now, why it mattered. She paused. I took up too much space when we were kids. I didn't leave any room for you. We were kids. Kids are selfish. I tried to find the right words. I was just trying to exist. You more than exist now, hon, she said, gesturing to the mantle. You're incredible, Cassie. So are you. She smiled and it was real. Not performative, not manipulative, just genuine. I'm sorry, she said, for all of it, for not seeing you, for trying to make everything about me, for taking your photos after. She stopped, confused. Wait, that hasn't happened yet? Or it's okay, I said quickly. Because that life, that timeline where I died at 23 and she'd taken my entire existence to decorate her grief, didn't exist anymore. You don't have to apologize for something you didn't do. But she had done it, just in a different life, a life I'd been given the chance to rewrite. We stood there looking at the photos, two sisters who'd finally learned how to exist in the same space without one of them disappearing. Years later, when I'd tell people about my relationship with my sister, I'd say it was complicated, that we'd had to work hard to understand each other, that it took a long time for us to figure out how to be family in a healthy way. I'd never tell them about dying at 23, about being reborn, about spending 13 years systematically rewriting every dynamic that had made me invisible. They wouldn't believe me anyway. But sometimes when I looked at the photos on my own walls, my apartment in Boston, my life, my documented existence, I'd remember that other timeline, the one where Riley had taken my childhood photos for her room after I died, where she'd curated my memory to make herself look good, where I'd disappeared even in death. In this life, my photos were mine. My achievements were mine. My story was mine. I took up space. I existed. I mattered. And Riley had learned to be okay with that. We'd never be the kind of sisters who talked every day or were best friends. Our personalities were too different. Our childhood wounds too deep. But we could stand next to each other in photos now. Equal. Both visible. Both real. And every time I saw those photos, both of us present, both of us in focus, neither of us erased, I felt a fierce joy. I'd rewritten history, one photograph at a time. I'd deleted myself from the role of forgotten daughter and written myself into my own story as the protagonist I'd always been meant to be. And this time, nobody could take that away from me.